In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can
And we're
do for
recording.
you.
It's a recording in progress, so we're doing it.
I see.
Cool. Hi, Taylor. How are you?
Good. I was telling you, just like working on stuff, but one thing that we did this today is Juan pulled up a bunch of weeds in the yard, and I've also had the worst allergies of my whole entire life, so I've had a lot of allergy pills. I'm like, so it's a little cloudy in here,
Very good.
but it's very, very stuffed in like here, this area under my nose hurts.
Did they not knock you out
Under
when
my
you
eyes.
take those pills?
No, you know what? I need to talk to a doctor of ill repute because like I desperately want to sleep on airplanes. I can take like 3 allergy pills and three Dramamines and not fall asleep.
Are you a nervous flyer?
Yeah, but like why can't my body just take a bunch of drugs and fall asleep?
That would
What
be
the hell?
nice. That'd be nice. I can't sleep on planes because I'm really big, and I'm always afraid that I'm gonna like kind of fart. One time I was flying to Vail, and I was on a plane, and I fell
hmm
asleep, and I woke myself up by farting really loudly on the plane, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Everybody looked at me, and I was like,
I'm
"Just
sure
never do this
I'm sure
again."
that happens all the time. I don't know how anyone, I mean, I'm 5'3". I don't know how anyone an inch taller than me goes on an airplane because I'm super uncomfortable. And I know people who are much taller than me who fly. One of my friends at work, he's like 6'4", and he flew the other day in the middle seat. And I'm like, oh my
Ugh.
God, sounds fucking terrible.
Exit row. Always the exit row. That's the rule. Cool.
Ugh.
Well, we could go ahead and kick things off. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, our true crime slash history podcast about things slash relationships that were doomed to fail. I'm Fars, joined by Taylor, and I think today it is Taylor's turn to go first.
Yes.
It is Taylor's turn. Okay. So I'll tell you my drink, and then we'll segue over to you.
Okay.
I'm gonna drink a big old glass of milk.
Gross.
You'll understand why in the
But
next
cool.
episode.
No, good for you. That's gross. I used to drink milk when I was a kid, but I don't know. I can't imagine these days. Cool. Well, great. Mine is whiskey on the rocks. And the important part of that is rocks because guess what? I'm a geologist now from all the reading that I did this week. Isn't that exciting?
Is that touching on volcanologists or is it separate?
It is. I learned a lot about geology this week
Sweet.
because we're talking about a volcano. Yeah. And I was also thinking like, why didn't I study science in school? Because then I'm like, this is all so cool. Like I'm just like learning all this stuff. I'm like, this is awesome. And then actually, I know someone who is a geologist, and they went to a wedding with their partner, and their partner was just like, I don't know, something was so off about her. I was like talking to other people, and I was like, is she okay? Did she like recently escape from a cult? Like, what is going on? Like, super weird. And my husband was like, she's just a geologist. And I was like, okay, like that explained it to me.
I did
Which is neat.
science. I was a biology major for maybe a semester in college before I realized like it stops being cool and interesting and fun like real quick once you start getting into like the nitty gritty of like the chemistry of things and like the deep science of it.
Well, that was actually part of my question, because like at what point when you study science do people start asking you questions? You know, like
I never got
you don't
far
have,
enough.
yeah, I feel like that turning point is when you like become a scientist, you know?
Could be. Or when you have
Anyway,
to do peer-reviewed papers, I think. One of the two.
yeah, oh, that's true. When you're like in PhD school,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, so I was like, okay, maybe people are getting sick of volcanoes because this is number 4 of the 7-part series. So we're like over the crescendo of the volcano talk. But then I was reading this book called Krakatoa, The Day the World Exploded, and I said wow like 15 times while I was reading it. So I'm super interested. I think it's still got some cool stuff that we can learn together. So we're
Sweet.
talking about Krakatoa,
Love it.
which erupted on August 27th, 1883.
That's my birthday.
Cool.
Hey, my event's on August
Oh,
27th too. Wait, what year's yours?
is it 1883?
Mine's 1883. Mine's August
Yours is
27th,
not August
1883.
27th, 1883. Is it a volcano?
No, but the events, that's when it happened. That's so weird.
I don't believe you.
Okay, I'll tell you my story later then.
Okay.
All right. Keep going.
Okay. So when we're talking about Toba, the first one that erupted 70,000 years ago, um, we learned a lot about human evolution. Remember? Different stages of man. We all came from those like 10,000 breeding pairs, all those things. And just like we talked about human evolution then, this time we're talking about geology and the study of geology and rocks in the earth. And some of our old friends pop up in the story as well that we've talked about in the past, which is super delightful. So get to that. So, reminder that there's levels of eruption. There's a volcanic explosivity index, and each number up is double the one below it.
Yep.
And so this one actually fills our list. So we've hit one at 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all of them are different levels of Plinian, which you also learned. So there's like ultra Plinian, Plinian, those kind of overlap with the numbers. But each number also has another fun adjective with it. So number 5 is a cataclysmic eruption. That was a Vesuvius. Number 6 is a colossal eruption. That's Krakatoa. We'll talk about it today. Number 7 is a supercolossal, ultra Plinian. That's Tambora that we talked about the last time. And then number 8 is mega colossal, like Toba, the first one we talked about.
Whoa,
This one's a
okay.
6. So just like Tambora and Toba, this one is in Indonesia. And where Krakatoa is located, like if you're looking at Australia, if you go to the east coast of Australia and go straight up, you're going to hit Malaysia. It's between Malaysia and Australia, if
Okay.
that makes sense. So picture it there. The island of Krakatoa, so it was like an island that had the volcano in the middle. It was part of a group of islands in that area. It may or may not have erupted in the past. And obviously, something else probably happened in the millions of years that is not recorded. But in recorded history, it could have erupted anywhere between 3 and 11 times, but like maybe 2 that we can actually kind of confirm with evidence. There is a book called The Javanese Book of Kings, which is a non-scientific history of the area written in the 19th century. So kind of a lot of made up stuff. But in that book, the author said that there was an eruption in 416 AD. And it's hard because their calendar was different than, the Roman
Yeah.
calendar, obviously. So like it's a little bit weird to like juggle that around. But in that history, they write that there was like a big bang and smoke in the air and all of those things. But there's no scientific evidence for that. There is a little bit of evidence for an eruption happening in 535 AD, which might be the one that he was talking about, but just got the date wrong. Because in China, for all of history, since China's been able to write, they've been taking notes about everything. So there's a note in 535 AD in China being like, we just heard a big sound. We don't know what it is.
Oh, wow.
So that could have been Krakatoa. There's also an ongoing list of things that happened in like Java and like Indonesia and this area that like the native people have been writing on for a long time. And something that happens culturally is like if you have like a record keeper in town who's keeping records of like things like, oh, this year the crops were like this, or this year, like whatever, these people came in from the ocean, all these things. If you are if everything's going well, you're going to keep putting things in that book. If everything is not going well, you're going to stop because you have to rebuild your society. Does that make sense? So
you're saying that you would
after,
stop doing history?
yes, because you literally, all of the houses got destroyed. So you take a break. So in 416, nothing happened. They kept writing. But in 535, they stopped writing for about 2 decades because maybe they were busy
Whoa.
fixing everything, So
Yeah.
that's the kind of evidence that we have that maybe it happened in 535. There's another one in 1680, and we'll talk more about this. This is the Dutch East Indies, so a lot of Dutch people in this story. But a sailor named Johann Wilhelm Vogel arrived in 1679 to Sumatra, then went back to Batavia. Batavia is Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia, and he noticed that Krakatoa was different than the first time that he went past it, like that it was a little bit like shorter. And there was like smoke coming out of it. A sailor told him there had been an eruption and they'd seen some like pumice. You could see the smoke and there were little earthquakes. So it's like a little bit of evidence that happened, but we don't know if there was like a huge eruption before the big one. Make sense?
Yes. Something
Okay.
probably happened. We're
So
not 100% sure. There's a lot of disparate
we'll
accounts.
never know.
It is all circumstantial.
Yes, but we knew it was like not a regular old island. We knew something was up.
Right.
Even before like people knew what volcanoes were. And they knew and they, would explain it like, there's a really mean god on that island. And you're like, sure, yeah, there is. Like, don't it's mean. It's like always kind of smoking. So we know this is the Dutch East Indies, like I just said, and a little history of the area. Obviously, there's a big slave trade going through here. This is a little bit after the mutiny on the Bounty, but a little bit like kind of in that same area. Captain Cook, who was the captain that was right before the mutiny on the Bounty, that knew the captain from the Bounty, the one who was murdered in Hawaii. Remember that guy we're
I
talking
don't know the
about?
name.
He's like one of the big Dutch explorers. Anyway, he stopped at Krakatoa, and like had written about it before he was murdered in Hawaii. And this is also what the Dutch were getting from this area. A lot of it was spices. And people had been getting spices from Indonesia for almost 1,000 years, and bringing it back to Europe. So pepper is like one of the big spices that comes from this part of Java. And our friend Pliny the Elder, in one of his encyclopedias, when he wrote the first encyclopedia, he said that the Roman Empire spends so much on pepper that they're going to go bankrupt. And then he later died in Mount Vesuvius, which is kind of fun that
Is
he
there
talked about pepper.
is there more utility to pepper than a seasoning?
So no, but like imagine not having it. So like this is another thing. Have you ever seen that meme where white people find a bay leaf in their Chipotle and they freak out?
I haven't, but that sounds right.
It's like people being like, "Oh my God, I paid $15 for this salad and there's a leaf in it. Like I'm gonna call Chipotle, whatever." And then people are like, "White people spent like thousands of years colonizing the world for spices, and these people don't know what a bay leaf is."
Is your position on this is that if you don't have pepper, I mean you got to buy a lot of pepper to bankrupt the country in
Yeah,
case
but
you
if you
need it.
don't have it, like, I don't know, if you don't have any spices, like I don't know, getting spices sounds really exciting, obviously.
Yeah,
And like that's not my opinion. That's like colonialism.
right,
A lot of
right.
people have
Fair
spices,
enough.
you
That's
know?
exactly why it happened.
Yeah. Um, so there's also starting in like the 11th century, there was a London Guild of Pepperers, which is now the London Guild of Grocers. It just sounds very British. So like we've been thinking about pepper for a very long time. But now it's the 1880s. It's definitely Dutch in that area. It's in Jakarta. They're doing things like they're building these big Dutch bridges. And in the book that I read, they said that the best that we have or visual we have of these bridges is actually a painting that Van Gogh painted in Arles when he was institutionalized of one of these big bridges, and you can see it
No,
if you
cool.
look it up. It's called the Langoley Bridge in Arles.
Langley.
Langlois. Langoloi. I don't know, whatever. Langlois. So,
Yeah, that's really
so it's
pretty.
Dutch. It's really pretty, of course. And so then there's a lot of slavery, but there's also a lot of mixed culturally. There's people from China there. There's people from all over the world in this area. It's a big port area, as we've learned over the years. And it's run by the Dutch East India Company, which you also have learned about. So now I need to take two side quests, one into evolution and two into tectonic plates. So first, Charles Darwin, who we know, had a colleague named Alfred Russel Wallace, who was also figuring out the same thing at the same time. So Darwin is in the Galapagos Islands. Wallace is in Indonesia, near Jakarta, in this area. Wallace is actually the person who wrote a letter to Darwin and like used the word survival of the fittest first. So he was like
Whoa.
figuring this out at the exact same time. He was a little bit more of like he's not as famous as Darwin, obviously. He was kind of like always like they call him like the moon of Darwin because he's always like in his orbit. They were like friends kind of, but Darwin like took all the credit. Whatever, that's probably way more complicated than I just said, but you know what I mean. But the basic idea is that they're looking at islands and they're looking at like the plants and the animals and they're like, well, why is this here and why is that there? Why does Australia have animals that nobody else has? Like why are some animals everywhere? Why are some only in some places? Same with plants. Why do islands have similar vegetation if they're separated? So
Right.
they're asking these questions and trying to understand like what could have caused this to happen. So part of their theory is they're like something has to be, bringing things between the islands in some way or something. So
Makes
that's kind
sense.
of they're thinking about that. And then much later, there's a German scientist named Alfred Wegener, and he was born in 1880, and he was looking at rocks the way Darwin was looking at alive things. Like he was looking at the Earth and the surface of the Earth in geology, and he was like, "Have you guys seen the continents and the way that they fit together like a puzzle?" And people were pissed. They were like, "Fuck you, no." He wrote a paper in 1915, and they like ostracized him from the community. They were like, "There's no way that's true. The Earth is fixed. The people like the plates don't move. There aren't plates. Nothing moves. Everything is just the way it is." And people were really, really mad. And then now I know you have not seen this, but like now there's literally a children's movie called Ice Age Continental Drift about the continents drifting apart,
I
like
have seen
in
Ice
like
Age.
less than 100 years. Have you seen it? There's like 7 of them. One of them is actually called Continental Drift, talking about when that actually happened, because now you learned that in elementary school, but we didn't accept that tectonic plates until 1965,
No
um,
way.
which is wild.
Wait, so
Yeah,
we flew to the moon before we accepted that theory?
they
I
could flew
think
to the moon in
so.
68, but close.
Close enough. Okay.
Yeah,
Fair enough. That's wild.
yeah, yeah. Like way recently, like after our parents were born, like
Yeah.
something that we like definitely take for granted. So we just like hadn't thought about land moving. So plate tectonics is telling us that the land is constantly moving, which is both the ocean floor and the continental floor, which is like the land that we live on. Continental drift is continents like maybe being Pangea, like one big continent, and then pulling apart, you know?
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, people started to revisit Alfred Wegener's things, like his hypotheses, because they were given access to ground penetrating radar because of the Cold War. Because they could say, like, oh, yeah, no, we have these guys up in Alaska studying the ground, when really they're listening for Soviet nuclear tests, you
Right.
know? So it gives them the opportunity to actually have these scientific discoveries. There's also things that they're learning, like in the Arctic, there's something, this is complicated and I don't 100% have it, but there's something where like when a rock is formed, it like is and it cools to like be a rock, its magnetic field locks in to the way that it was the day it was formed. So when a rock like finally cools, which is like solidifies and becomes a rock, it's the magnetic field of that rock will always point north and south. Like, the rock can move, but like the magnetic field in it will always point to the poles, north and south. So when they're looking at rocks in different layers, their magnetic poles move, which either means the poles moved in history or the land moved. You know,
I didn't know rocks had magnetic poles.
they do.
Does that
I
mean
don't
you
know
can
if you're
use
a
a magnet on
geologist,
a rock?
come at me. No, it's
Okay.
something you have to like have a very special thing to find. Yes, no,
What's the
rocks aren't magnetic, but they have like this like
Taylor
magnetic
as our
history inside of them.
Taylor as our resident geologist, what is the very sophisticated thing you need to use to figure that out?
I don't
Damn
know.
that fars.
God damn it. That's in the next part of my PhD in
Yes.
geology. I'll let you
Well,
know.
fair.
So either the poles moved or the ground moved, and so it means the ground moved. So like the ground has shifted. Incidentally, one of the scientists that was one of the top people to bring this tectonic plate idea in the 60s, his name was Dr. S. Keith Runcorn. He In 1995, when he was 73, he was murdered in his hotel room in San Diego as part of a robbery, which is
Oh, that's
terrible.
sad.
He was just like about to speak about geology. It's like old nerd man who's murdered, which is sad. So anyway, now people are like, we believe you, science, and we're learning about tectonic plates for the first time, and it's 1965. So here's
Wait,
a couple
what's this
things,
guy's name
couple
again?
different.
Vinegar? Vinegar?
Yeah, Vinegar is the guy. Yeah, he's the guy. Wegener. Vigener. Alfred. He's the guy from who wrote that paper in 1915 that everybody was mad about.
Got it.
Not the guy who was murdered. Okay. So here's a couple things that I learned about plates. There's oceanic plates that are the plates that are under the ocean, like the ocean floor. When those bump into each other, it creates islands. which we've seen. So, underneath the ground, underneath the ocean, there's like all those like mountains and stuff, and they grow as that moves, and that makes an island. There is there are continental plates, so that's like land, land, and when those hit each other, they create huge mountains, like Mount Everest huge,
Right.
because it's two like big plates hitting each other. They create the Himalayas and like those big mountains. Um, the San Andreas Fault that I live on is a conservative plate boundary, and in this case, it's two continental plates not hitting each other. It's like as dramatically as like the Himalayas do, but they're next to each other. So in the book, they described it as like a tire against the curb when you're parallel parking.
Right.
So like
Okay.
that's what's happening here. So it's creating like little mountains and like little things, like nothing like the Himalayas. But then when that kind of like scooches and like the pressure builds up, that's when we have earthquakes over here, but it's not going to create a volcano because a volcano is created by a subduction zone, which is when an ocean plate and a land plate hit each other. And the ocean plate is heavier because it's further down than the continental plate. I'm using my hands, so this is
Yeah.
helpful. So the ocean plate goes underneath the continental plate, and then parts of the continental plate kind of fall into it, and that creates sort of that like hole that creates a volcano. Oh my God, that's as far as I got.
No, no.
So,
Okay. So this stuff, Taylor,
does that
like
make sense?
I am like I've always been infinitely fascinated with this stuff because it is like scales and orders of magnitude that is so hard for your brain to even comprehend and wrap around. But
I
then
know.
but then, you're joking about, but you do the hand thing that you just did, which nobody can see. But like, you do the hand thing, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like, if there's magma in the middle of the Earth, and then the only thing
Hmm.
separating it is the crust of the Earth, and the crust of the Earth
Hmm.
goes up, is creating a spout for magma to flow out of, hence volcanoes.
I love it. We both use our hands. I think we got it.
We are scientists, damn it.
Exactly. Another thing that I wanted to tell you is that the African continental plate is slowly moving towards Europe, and that's why like Turkey has a lot of earthquakes because it's like right in the middle of that spot,
Makes sense.
which I thought was interesting. Um, okay, so now we know how volcanoes happen. They're in those zones. They are wait, in those subduction zones, and now we're back to Krakatoa. It's a volcano, which we know. So a little bit of history again in this area. In 1782, the Treaty of Paris made the Dutch East India Company bankrupt. Napoleon made his brother the King of Denmark because, of course, he did. So Napoleon's brother was like technically in charge of the area for a little bit. But now it's the 1800s, and people are living on the island of Krakatoa. They're living on the neighboring islands. They're living in Jakarta, which is called Batavia at the time, which is about 100 miles away from Krakatoa. And what makes this story different that I know I talked about last time is when Tambora erupted in like 1815, there was no global communication. Now there is. So this is the first event that the whole world knew about basically at the same time
Whoa.
because it was the biggest disaster and we had telegraphs and we had underwater cables. So in 1844, the first telegraph message was sent by Samuel Morse. Do you remember what he sent?
No.
What hath
No.
God wrought?
Oh, there's no way I was going to guess that. I was going with like a knock knock
It's
joke,
very, it's,
maybe.
it's just, no. So by 1856, they have telegraphs in Jakarta. So they have like a city gas works. In 1870, they had their own ice works, which I thought was fun because before that, they had to import ice from Boston, which sounds insane. Like, how do you get ice from Boston to Indonesia on a boat, keeping it very cold? Um, there's a telephone. So things are kind of like starting to happen pretty quickly. And so it is. Oh, wait, another thing, just to tell you, is that there's the telegraph, which kind of goes through like the air, and then there have these subterranean cables. So the first one they laid broke, but the second one that they lay in the early 1880s, it works. So you can quickly send a message from like Indonesia to like mainland China and like up to Malaysia and like up to the rest of the world. By literally, they put a cable in the ocean, which I know they do now, but like it feels like a long time ago to do that. And I always think that's crazy.
That is crazy. How
It is
much
bizarre.
cable do you,
And
how
so the
much
re
cable do you take with you? Like, how do you know? God, there's so much
a
science
lot.
involved in it.
And so it also was able to work. The sub-oceanic cables were invented and only able to work because of a rubber that was only found in the Java area. which is cool. So like only it's because of like Indonesia and this area found a rubber plant that was able to put rubber around these cables and have that work. So I'm now
We,
going to
we
read
we don't
you.
we don't use those cables anymore.
Well, I mean, I hope not. It's been. Do we have any undersea cables? No, because we have satellites.
I don't know. I'm looking at it right now. Wow, man, it's crazy what humans have done. Like humans are really like me, not me. I'm not. I'm not
And
ingenious, but like
yeah, no,
people in
not me
general
either.
are.
And in a short amount of time. So yeah.
Anyway,
Um,
sorry, I
can I
derailed.
pause? Can I pause to read you a poem
Yes,
by Rudyard Kipling about underwater cables?
I love Kipling. I love his later work.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
The wrecks, the wrecks delve above us, their dust drops down from afar, down to the dark, to the utter dark, where the blind white sea snakes are. There is no sound, no echo of sound in the deserts of the deep, or the great gray level plains of ooze, where the shell bird cables creep. Here in the womb of the world, here on the tie ribs of earth, words and the words of men flicker and flutter and beat, warning, sorrow and gain, salutation and mirth, for a power troubles the still that has neither voice nor feet. They have wakened the timeless things. They have killed their father time, joining hands in the gloom, a league from the last of the sun. Hush! Men talk today over the waste of the ultimate slime, and a new world runs between them, whispering, "Let us be one."
Whoa,
Kind of fun.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
read it in a very
Um,
mysterious way too, which like helped with the atmosphere, I think.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's creepy. I get it. It's creepy that it's down there. Um, so now it's 1883. 1883 is a very wet year. So it's raining a ton. There's always little earthquakes around this area. But people start to notice weird things a couple weeks before the actual eruption. There's a captain who passes Krakatoa and he's like, it's a little dusty over there. Like the air is weird, you know? Like when we woke up in the morning, there was like a little layer of dust on the deck. Like we're not sure exactly what's happening. There's a woman named Mrs. Vanderstock who loses a plate. It falls off the wall and she like writes that down because like things are like the windows start shaking at random times. Like just like the earth, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah,
There's like a
yeah.
weird vibration in the air that like everybody can feel. And also another magnet thing, like magnets get messed up because there's iron in the ash that like is starting to come out of Krakatoa. So that's messing up like compasses and things like that because like messing up
Ooh.
the air. So it's just like feels weird around. People start sending messages back to Europe being like something weird is happening. A fisherman said that he saw the beach of Krakatoa on fire. Like they're like something's going on.
Hey,
Um,
don't like animals know this shit because they're like somehow tuned into like the magnet. You're gonna get to this, aren't you?
they might. I have a
Okay.
story about this. Just hold
Okay,
on.
okay.
But yes, exactly. Oh, another thing that I learned in this book that um I forget exactly where it fits in, but Julius Reuter, like of Reuters fame, is like one of the first people who was like a international, like trying to get news across the world. He started with pigeons, like having like pigeons carry news over long areas of time. And I guess a couple decades before this, he was able to get news of the assassination of President Lincoln to the UK in 12 days. So it's kind of fun.
Jeez.
However, he did that on like a fast boat.
Wow.
Um, so yes, to the animals. Do you remember when there was that little earthquake in like the East Coast and all the animals at the DC Zoo went nuts?
I
The
don't remember
flamingos
that.
got weird.
No. What do they
I
do?
was in New York when it happened, and they just like started flying around weird, and the monkeys start acting weird. All the animals start acting weird, and they don't really know why that happens.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the end of the summer. It's near the end of the summer. People are trying to act like everything is normal. There's a circus in town in Jakarta, and in the circus there's a baby elephant, and it's really freaking cute. And it starts to kind of freak out. Like they, who knows, but like maybe because of this. And the woman who's in charge of the baby elephant brings it to her room and it destroys the hotel room. And the next
I
day it like
mean,
feels better. So it like knew it was coming.
I don't know. If Dumbo's taught us anything, it's that maybe it missed its mom.
Oh, no, oh, never want to see the movie again. So sad.
Same.
Um, so there's a masked ball the night before, as well as people are trying to like they're going to the circus, they're having a good time, they're trying to live their lives, even though things are weird. At 10:02 a.m. on Sunday, the 27th of August, 1883, Krakatoa erupts. It completely destroys the island it was made of. So like Vesuvius, it's still a mountain. You can still like see it. Krakatoa is gone.
Oh wow.
Um, it's totally gone. The island is totally gone. 13% of the earth vibrated. Like people felt it thousands of miles away. They heard it thousands of miles away. It was like something that like people recorded hearing, just super far away. And again, like we saw with Tambora, they were like, are we being attacked? Is this like cannons? Like, what is this? It's like it was one of the loudest sounds ever recorded in the history of the world. It went around the earth like 7 times.
Oh
What are you
wow.
looking
Yeah,
up?
there's somebody did a graph of like Krakatoa, the island, like today, or like it's a
Hmm.
picture of the island today, and then it shows where the original summit was, and I'd say
Hmm.
probably two-thirds of it are gone, give or take. It's hard to
And
tell
that's
with the
that's
elevation.
actually that's not it. That's a new island.
That's a new island. Wow, okay.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you about it in a little bit. Krakatoa was totally gone. So some things that happen obviously is everyone on the island dies. Anyone that was like near it dies. There's lightning in the clouds. The
Wait, so
ash plume goes 20,
people were living on this?
yeah, like around it and like on like the islands near it. Yes.
Wow.
Because like volcanic islands are very lush, you
Yeah.
know. You like grow a lot of stuff there. Um, so the ash goes like 24 miles up into the air, hits the trade winds, so then that starts to go all over the world. Um, the at 5 p.m. pumice starts to fall, which burns, obviously burns homes and people. Um, People all over the world are now hearing about this, and they're also keeping track of the weather. So we talked about this the last time with Tambora, where like we didn't know the weather. People would just ask the oldest person they knew,
Right.
like, has it always been like this in June? And like Thomas Jefferson was one of the first people to write down the weather like daily, and Benjamin Franklin was like, maybe it's a volcano. Like these guys were just thinking about this stuff all the time. But so we have a lot of logs of the weather all over the world after Krakatoa erupted because Victorians would like write it down in their diaries. It was like a thing to do during that
Yeah.
time. So we know that like in England there were brilliant sunsets. So there's an artist named Church, one named Ashcroft, who did some beautiful watercolors. Probably The Scream by Munch was
I'm looking at
inspired
the
by
screen
the
right now.
sunsets. Yeah. And people could hear the sounds from thousands of miles away, but um, we knew what it was because it was the first time that there was like global news and people like knew it was happening pretty quickly. So Krakatoa is the most deadly volcanic eruption that we have on our list. The Dutch said the death toll was 36,417, but it's estimated it could be up to 120,000 people died. And a lot of them died because of the tsunami that came afterwards. So
Right.
obviously it like messed up the ocean, and then there was a tsunami. It killed a lot of people recently there, like there when it just happened. The water rushed so fast that like in England, Charles Darwin's son was like keeping track of the weather, and he noticed a little like blip in the water. Like it got all
Wow.
the way to England, Like there was like a little bit of like a little bit of like a 4 inch higher tide in like Europe than usual
Hey,
when
next
it like
question that's
killed
like
some
public.
people.
Next question is probably not answerable. What?
Mm.
Okay, so do the math on like why is it that one eruption is so much bigger than the other? All it comes down to is pressure and the ability for that pressure to alleviate itself. So does that imply that like for example, Krakatoa, the reason it was so powerful is because the pressure built longer because maybe the way the plates collided were denser and stronger and couldn't erupt sooner.
Maybe. I have no idea.
Yeah, I figured that probably be an
And I
unanswerable
wonder if it's
question.
like the depth, maybe it's like the depth of like the of like how far down it goes. Like maybe it goes like further into the core than like other ones, maybe. Isn't there like a
Maybe.
mantle in a core? Oh God, I don't know. Um, but I mean, it's a good question. Um, and then also like Tambora was technically higher on the scale, but it was mostly the atmospheric atmospheric effects that made Tambora so deadly because it was because it was so big. Do you remember we talked about this? Like if it had been like a smaller eruption, then like the way that like the light reflected off the ash like made it worse
Right,
for some
right.
reason.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember, but you know what I mean? So there's that too. So there are tons of reports of people across the coast of Africa and along the Indian Ocean finding just like huge pieces of pumice stone, like up to like a year or two later, coming up on the beach filled with skeletons of
Yeah.
people and animals.
Jesus.
Because like people would get killed in the pumice and it would just get like swept off to sea. So there's a lot of people who died that way. There's the summer temperatures in the northern hemisphere fell by an average of like 1 degree, which like in the terms of climate change and thinking about that, like a 1 degree change, like if it's like 70 to 69, who cares? But if it's not freezing to freezing, then like people die. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like that
right.
degree is a big difference. So, one story of a family that did survive. They were the Byrnic families. They were in Anher, which is a port town that was very close to Krakatoa. Mrs. Byrnic was like, things are weird. Like things have been weird for a few weeks. That morning, she asked to go to her country house, which is up on a mountain, and her husband was like, "No, we're fine. Let's stay here in town." He went down to the beach and he saw the ocean begin to swell. He saw that like pullback, like that weird thing the ocean does when he knows like a tsunami's coming. So them and their servants probably that probably is a whole thing that wasn't great. They started running up this hill to get to their cottage, and it was like pitch black in the middle of the day. There's pumice coming down. They're all burned. She's in her thing. She looks down at her arms and she sees that they're dirty and she tries to wipe off the dirt, but it's her skin. It's her
Ugh,
burned skin. They're
ugh.
just like, and they're running in. Like some of her, servants get there, some of them don't, but their whole actual house is totally destroyed. But they do survive by being able to climb that hill and hiding in that house. But it was just like obviously a horror show. There's chaos, there's loud booms for almost 20 hours. The tsunami, is seen everywhere. By the fall, like a couple months later, the atmosphere in New York was changed that firefighters in Poughkeepsie thought that there was a fire, and they kept looking around trying to find a fire, and they couldn't find one because it was just like the atmosphere was like red, like brilliant sunsets, like
Uh,
totally different colors, like we know. So after this happened, obviously there's a ton of cleanup. A lot of people are dead. A lot of people are, just like destroyed in many different ways. The native population of this area is and was mostly Muslim, and they started to become more devout and believe that maybe their God was punishing the white people for like the Dutch for being there. Not that there aren't white Muslim people, but like the Dutch for
yeah,
being
yeah.
there. And in 1888, there was a peasants' revolt in the Banton region. It started with a stabbing of a Dutch politician, and that led to some changes in that area. So that's kind of happening between like the 1880s and like the 1900s. There's a bunch of unrest in the area, like politically. But in the meantime, in 1930, there's an island that appears where Krakatoa used to be. There were a couple little islands that came up between then and 1930, but they kept kind of going back into the ocean. They didn't pop up for very long. But the one you see right now is called Anak Krakatau, which means the son of Krakatoa.
Aw,
And
it's kind of
it
cute.
was cute. And yeah, and it's also cool because it's a new island. And so we can go back to thinking about evolution and like what grows on a new island? What animals are on a brand new island? Like it was an opportunity to be like, what is the first thing here? So guess what the first animal they found on the island?
Cockroach.
Spider.
Aw, I like spiders.
And it was a little spider. And I don't like spiders, but this is so cute. I think he got there on like a little parachute. Like he made his little,
Spider, yeah, the
you
webbing
know,
thing.
spider web. Yeah, into a
And they
parachute.
throw it
And then
out,
he
and
like
then
parachuted onto the island.
it's really
Yeah.
cute.
And was like, I'm gonna live it by myself. So I feel hopefully he had a good life. Then other animals started to come and it's like how'd they get there? So either from like being like maybe like they floated over on like a piece of pumice or a log. People went there to try to like watch the new vegetation and see what was going to happen. And of course, they brought rats. So there's rats on the island now. Those came definitely from people. But some of the seeds might come from like, bird poop has seeds in it. Maybe that's how they got there. But it's like it's been an opportunity to be like, what happens if we start from nothing? What happens? And so they're like, is it stuff like under the pumice? Maybe there's still seeds. Maybe there's still this like underneath these things. We don't know. So It's interesting. Um, Other things that I learned about that area that I just hadn't gotten this far yet, is that the Dutch actually remained in control of Indonesia until the 1940s when the Japanese invaded in World War II. And Indonesia got its independence in 1945 after World War II was over.
Nice.
So I just didn't know that. So that's it. It's a really big one. And here's the things that I feel like my three big takeaways is I learned, well, I didn't know these things yet. Hold on. I learned about subduction zones, which is like the ocean plate hitting the continental plate and creating that volcano because of the pressure. We learned about that. I learned about tectonic plates and that's a relatively new thing. I also learned that as far as we know, other planets don't have continental drift and tectonic plates.
Weird. I wonder why.
Like there might
Well,
be one of the moons of like Jupiter might have them, but they don't have oceans, right? That's a big part of it. But like, I think we're alone in that potentially.
actually, wait. What makes the continent drift? Is it the waves of the ocean?
It's just like they're constantly moving from like pressure from the core. So it's not the ocean. It's like the core is pressure up moving around. So it's like the oceanic plate is moving and the continental plate is moving, because they're always kind of like being agitated by the core.
God, the
And the
world is
whole
so
reason they're being
scary.
agitated by the core, it's so scary. I'm going to end on a real scary thing. This is the third thing I learned. That's happening from the core because the core is cooling. So as the core cools, it has to have that pressure, and the pressure is released by moving around the plates, by volcanoes, by like things like that we see. And what's going to happen eventually is the Earth's core is going to just cool, and then that's it.
And then what happens?
The Earth is over. That everything will die.
Yeah, but then
We'll be dead by then.
Yeah, isn't the sun supposed to explode too, though?
Yeah, totally. I don't know which one's going to happen first.
And then isn't like another galaxy supposed to absorb our galaxy?
Well, like our galaxy is like always growing, but there's like a special point that I sometimes we watch YouTube videos about that scares me, where like it ends and we can never go any further. But the galaxy keeps getting pulled out that way. I don't know. It's a lot more existential than you think it would be. I think it's just a volcano exploding, but then you're like, no, it's like scientific discoveries and it's trying to figure out what's going on. And it's like understanding that it's not a god, understanding that it's the Earth. But also, is that more terrifying? That the Earth is like doing all these crazy things inside the core. And it's something you learn in elementary school, but I don't think about it as like scarily as it is as I do now.
Wait, so hold
Now I'm
on.
scared.
So what? Uh, what? By
What are you looking at?
2.8 years from now, the surface temperature of the Earth will have reached 300 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point,
In
any
two
remaining
years?
life will, no, 2.8 billion.
Oh, okay.
So, and then in
But the
three to
core is
four,
cooling. Is the Earth's core cooling? I hope someone uses this as like you can put this in your bibliography for your project at school. Yeah, the
um,
Earth's core is, oh God, it's cooling faster than previously thought. Cool. Cool, 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 cool.
um,
How Earth's cooling molten core could destroy the planet. BBC Science Focus. I'm gonna take some deep breaths. I agree. God, I
wait,
don't know why.
solidification of the outer core. Um, the inner core is expected to consume most or all of the outer core 3.4 or 3 to 4 billion years from now, resulting in an almost completely solidified core composed of iron and other heavy elements. The surviving liquid envelope will mainly consist of lighter elements, yada yada yada. The interior will cool less efficiently, which would slow down or stop the inner core's growth. In either case, this can result in a loss of magnetic dynamo. The magnetic field of the Earth will decay in 10,000 years. It will cause a. I don't know what any of this means.
Oh my
Yeah, I
God,
don't
I
know
wish
what
we
any
had
of
a
this
video for this
means.
episode because well, anyway, it's a lot. Um,
Did you know
I'm
the
a budding
sun's
geologist.
Did you know that the sun is going to grow to a level where it will consume the Earth because it'll get so big? It's called
Yes.
its red giant
Hmm.
phase.
I did know that. I did know that. You learned that inexplicably when you were a kid. They teach you that, which I don't even want to know now. Because like, it's not tomorrow. I just like don't even want to think about it.
It kind of makes everything futile, doesn't it? Like, why are we even doing
It
anything?
totally
Why are we even doing this
does.
podcast? Like, why am I
No,
looking at the
everything,
Cowboys score right now? Like, who cares?
literally nothing matters. Yep. Hmm.
Dope, dope.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well,
Cool. So three more volcanoes to go.
not that it matters, not that any of this matters, but yes, we have three more
Not that it
volcanoes to
matters,
go.
but I know a lot more about volcanoes than I did a year ago.
We're all gonna
Um,
die in a horrible flame.
somehow, somehow. So cool. That's all I
Sweet.
got.
Well, thanks,
Thanks.
Taylor. That was
Um,
fun. Do you have anything you want to read out?
um, I did, but I can't remember what it is. I don't have any listener mail. Oh, I did want to say my friend Elizabeth has been listening and she's very cute and she was like, I've been yelling along with you guys and she's like, I've been acting like you're just in my house with me talking to me. So I thought that was very
Aw,
nice. So I just wanted to
thank you,
say hi.
Elizabeth.
And yeah, that's all I got for now.